Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today on the Succah Daf Chafala, we are going to begin on the bottom of Chafal Medbeis, 4 lines from the bottom. Tanan Hassam. So we were learning in the Mishnah, beginning of the second parak, that a person is not allowed to sleep underneath a bed in a sukkah. If they do so, they have not fulfilled their obligation. Now, according to Shmuel said, and this is according to all opinions, if the bed is under 10 tfachim, so therefore that will not create an ohel, and therefore you haven't done anything wrong. You could sleep underneath such a bed. However, if the bed is more than 10 tfachim, according to the opinion of the Tanakama, that creates an ohel. Rabbi Yehuda, we'll see why today, says it's not an issue even above 10 tfachim. Tanan Hassam. Echad chor shecharuhu mayim o shratzim o shachlasu melachas. Let's say you have regarding an ohel. It doesn't matter if the hole was created by water or by shratzim, these bugs that chewed through it, or it got somehow whole because of salt water. L'chein midvach avadim, so too an arrangement of stones. L'chein sarish shel kairis, when it comes to putting many beams next to each other. So you create space, and therefore because of that, it's mahal al hatoma. According to the opinion of the Tanakama, it creates an ohel for tuma. Says Rashi, Avhein kairis hamaruchais al gabi karka zu agavzu the oimnus labinyan. They're ready for building. You store them and stack them up. V'yisham harbi nikavim b'neihem. There's a lot of holes and space between them. V'yish behen oil, and because of there's like this tent of space. Kol elu im kazayis meis b'soich oil. Let's say you have a kazayis of a mace within this ohel. B'rosh echad, the kelim b'rosh sheni, and then there's kelim on the other one. Nitmu b'oil hameis. We say that it becomes tamei. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kol oil sheinu asu b'di adam enu oil. Any oil which was not made by man is not an ohel. Says Rashi, mischavein lasais oil. You actually have to have the kavanah that you wanted this to be an oil. If you did not have the intention for this to become an ohel, then it doesn't do anything. It does not create an ohel regarding the dinim of tumah. So my time to Rabbi Yehuda. So why does Rabbi Yehuda say this din of kol oil shein asuyim b'di adam is not an oil? So as we continue chafal from now, yop oil memishkan. We learn out of Gzer Shava from the Mishkan. Ksiv hacham v'zois atar adam kemos ba'oil. Ksiv hasam v'yirpoi says oil al hamishkan. So they made and spread an ohel over the Mishkan. Shamalhan b'di adam, afkan b'di adam. Obviously, when the Mishkan was made, it was done intentionally to create an ohel. So too, the only time we say this din, that there's an ohel that's created regarding dinim of tumah, is daf in a circumstance where you have the kavanah. However, if you just threw a bunch of rocks together and there's space in between them, that's nothing. Rabbanan oil riva, according to the Rabbanan, because of that word being mentioned so many times, that's not adequate for Gzer Shava. V'sav Rabbi Yehuda, so correct the Gemara, does Rabbi Yehuda really hold that kol oil sheinu asu b'di adam enu oil? Like we said, if it's not made with intention, and it's not considered to be an oil, if it wasn't made by man, it's not an ohel. Raminhu chatzeres hoy benuis b'Yerushalayim al gavi asela. There was these courtyards that were built in Yerushalayim on a rock. V'tachteihem chalal, and underneath them there was space. V'nei kerat haim. And Rashi keeps saying it's a suffix. There's a possibility of a mace, and we want to be extremely careful when it comes to the dinim of the paraduma. And we want to make sure that there is no possibility of any tumah around. So maviyin noshim urois. Interestingly enough, they would actually take pregnant women, the eldasham, and they would give birth on this rock, in which there was this space underneath. So So therefore, as we saw already on Daf Yud, if there's a tefach space, that's a chaytzetz from the tumah. So there's no way anyone can become tamei. Umegadlis b'neim sham l'para, and they would grow up their children there, and those children would be engaged in the din of the parduma. Umavin shvarim, they would bring oxen. Yal gabein delasais, and on the top of the oxen they had doors. But tinakas yoishin al gabein, kids sat on them. With kaisa shel even b'yadeya, and they were holding these stone cups. Hegiu shiluach. Once they reached the water of the shiluach, yordo sachamayim. So they went physically off the ox, which it sounds like that's what they did, and they went into the water. They would gather the water, they would go back up the animal and sit on these doors. Rabbi Yossi says, no. Rabbi Yossi Omer, actually from there they would let the cup go down and scoop up the water. Even there they were concerned in the shiluach, they did not allow them to get off these oxen. So apparently while they were on these oxen there was not an issue. But Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer, and this is why we're bringing it down because we now see Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. They didn't require the doors. El Shvarim, all they had was these oxen, and that would be enough to separate from any form of tumah. Who obviously when we're talking about an animal who was created and born, it wasn't done with the intention that it should create some type of ohel, so that this way this person will not become tamei. That's certainly not the case. Because they didn't bring doors, only oxen. The question is, why would he say this is acceptable? Well, chayra, the oxen is not an oil. It's not a proper oil. So let's look in Rashi. El Shvarim. What exactly is this specialty of these oxen? Kirisas rachavois. Their stomachs are wide. V'tinoikis yoishin aleihim, and the kids are on sitting on them. V'krisan masik, and their stomach separates. Shena tinokas mahal al aretz, that the child is not going to be getting tumah from the ground. So the stomach is what protects it. So what do we see, says Rashi? Alma, Ashmi'ina Rabbi Yehuda, the Shadrasin Shel Shvarim, the backbone of the oxen, Shikein Gag, it's like a roof, V'chalol Shel Behema, the space inside, Hu Ha'oil, Hamasik, that must be what separates the Tumah. V'yafagav the Eno Asmini Yadam, but it wasn't made by man. It wasn't with the cow's stomach, the ox's stomach, wasn't created with the kavanah to be an oil. So how does this make sense according to Rabbi Yehuda? So the Gemara gives the following answer. Very interesting. Says Rashi, Kamali Egrov, oil sharachav Kamali Egrov. If you have an oil which is very wide, the size of a fist, shu yoiser betefach, which is even more than a tefach, Ma'id Rabbi Yehuda, shalpa vishenos v'di adam, even though it was not made by man, choshev liyos oil. It's still shy to become an oil, and therefore, when we saw this case regarding the chor, the hole of the midvach avanim, etc., that was exactly a tefach. However, it's kamale egreif, which is bigger. Even if it's not os v'di adam, nonetheless, it still has the capacity to work, to separate. So that's how Rabbi Yehuda will answer the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Tani mehachi. But Rabbi Yehuda agrees b'shekipin u'v'nekike hasaloyim. If we're dealing with these caves and big stones that fall and therefore create a very large hole, which is kamali egroif or even more, then even he will hold, even though it was not asta b'di adam, nonetheless it'll still be an oil. So for the Gemara, Bahari Delas, Yeshbal Kami Groifin, it's many Groif in the door because Tan Rabbi Yehuda, Aimer Lo Haima being the Lasas El Shvarim. Why is he against these doors? Well, it's kamali egroik, so it should also work. Rabbi, so we have two answers. You're right, you could do it, but you don't need it because you already have the ox. The ox's stomach in itself is an oil, so you don't need the door. The doors would actually cause a problem. Why? Because a child will maybe be fooling around on that ox. As we continue to Chaf Alpha Beis, or again, Rashi again says with suffix kever. So we don't want this child to be on the door because then he can maybe start moving his hands around. But if he's on an ox, he's going to remain steadfast on that animal and he will not go away. So this way there'll be no issue of the suffix kever. As the Gemara now echoes, Tanik Vas did the Rabbi. So instead, what do? El Mavim Shvarim. We only bring oxen, Hamitzriim, these Egyptian oxen. What's so special about them? As we said before, Shekir Seihin Rechavos, because their stomachs are wide. It's Kamali Egro for more. Patinakos Yoshel Al Gabein, Mekaisis Shel Evan Biadein. Hagil Shulach, once they get to this place, Yardu, according to this opinion, they went down. Molam Ba'ov Yoshel Hen Al Gabein, and then they went back up. So he said, Ibahar Mita, the Yeshua Kameh Greifin. So now the Gemara says, the Mita, the bed, is also Kamalei Greifin. So Rabbi Huda Omer no Haganahinu Shahinu Yishem Tachas Mita Minazakanim. Well, Chayra, it's an issue. So we can understand, a bed, why does he mat there? A person can sleep under the bed. It's not an oil. Why is it not an oil? Because it's Eno Asu B'Diyado. It wasn't made, that oil, by a person for that purpose. It wasn't made, we're going to sleep on the top of the bed. You didn't intend to make it into an oil. So the question is, so if it's Moli Agroif, so it doesn't matter to Yehuda, even if it's not Asu B'Diyado, it still should be an oil, and therefore you should not be able to sleep under it even according to Rabbi Yehuda. So Shani Mita Hoyel L'Gabo Asuya. Yeah, but a bed is made for the top, and since it's on the top, certainly the bottom was not an oil. So Shvarim Nam L'Gabo Asuyin. So an ox also, its purpose is to go on top of it. The stomach is not to go underneath the stomach; it's to go on the top of it and to ride it. So Kiyas Rabban Amar Rebbe Lezer Shani Shvarim Hoyel L'Maginim Al Haroyim. So if it's starting to rain and you're a shepherd, just sit underneath the oxen and assume that that's a comfortable thing to do or a safe thing to do. So it's possible that, no, the stomach of an ox really also could be for the bottom. So so maybe you should say also that the bed also has a purpose underneath, to put your shoes. So why does it say shoes? So Agav, Rashi says, according to Baba Basra, Ezu Mita Shel Talmid Chachamim. How do you know a bed is a Talmid Chacham's bed? Kol Shein Tachta Gamin Elohim Shel Bal Habayis. If all you do is see they have shoes under the bed and nothing else. Mimosachama, Masandaloim, Mimosachashamim, Shenoistim Sham. So Kashuba Lishka Valishan, when you are about to go to sleep, Chayletz Manal, you take off your shoes, and Noisim Tachas Mitasu, you put them underneath your bed. Of the Losses Tachta Davar Macherim, anything else, Gnai Huloi. Shemargu B'nei Abayis L'Sham. Because people are going there and it's an embarrassment, right? According to Rashi, it's more like sneeze. The Rashbam says a Talmid Chacham is a neat person. So you can tell if it's a Talmid Chacham by looking underneath their bed. If you look underneath their bed, if it's clean, if it doesn't have a bunch of dust and dirt and garbage, so you know that's a Talmid Chacham. It's an amazing thing. A Talmid Chacham is not just someone who learns Gemara, not someone who just masters Torah. It's also the way that they act, it's the way that they behave, it's the way that their homes look. And that's what it says. So the question is that a bed also is for the bottom. So l'chayra it should be an oil. According to Rabbi Yehuda, so El Omer Rava Shani Shvarim Hoyel Yisrim L'Hagin Al Bnei Mayim Shalahen. The purpose of the stomach is it protects their innards, their internal organs. Shnemer, the pasuk says, quoting in a pasuk in Iyuv, or ubasar, the skin, the hide, and the flesh, talbisheni, it covers me with garment. Uvatsamois v'gidim tisaychacheni, and the bones and the sinews is my tisaychacheni, which sounds like schach. So that's the reason why when it comes to an ox, we make the exception, even though it's in Osmedi Adam, it's Kamalei Greifim, and it does serve as tisaychacheni. But under the bed, it's only used sometimes for shoes, so it's not considered to be an oil. That's answer number one. Yiboisema, the more accepted and remembered answer, maybe Hudel Tameh, Diarma Sukkah Deras Keva Bina. A sukkah is a Deras Keva. But Havile meet the Deras Aroi. And a bed is certainly which is something temporary. You move it, you take it. The sukkah oil Keva. So Veloyas oil Arai, Mevat oil Keva. This oil, which is Arai, which is inside the sukkah, cannot be Mavatal the sukkah. So therefore you can sleep under it because an oil Arai cannot be Mavatal the oil Keva of the sukkah. Rav Shimon Nami Sukkah there is Keva Be'inan. However, he says, also Arai Mavatal oil Keva. He says, yeah, in. Well, please, they argue with this. Marsa Ba'asi oil Arai Mavatal oil Keva. Marsa Ba'asi oil Arai Mavatal oil Keva. So that's what Rabbi Yehuda Shita. Rav Shimon Masa B'Tavi Avdoi. So he was praising, he was so impressed, Rabbi Yehuda was, how great his servant Tavi was. Tanya Rav Shimon Mesichasa Shal Rabbi Gamliel, even from the light conversation and words of Rabbi Gamliel, Lamanu stated Rabbi Gamliel two things. First of all, Lamanu Shal Rabbi Sukkah. Servants do not have to be in the sukkah. Lamanu Shal Rabbi Gamliel. And if someone does chavasa, even if you do sleep underneath that bed, then you have not fulfilled your obligation. I believe in midvar of Shal Rabbi Gamliel. Why is it the same as Sichasai? So Mil Sagab Orcha Kamash Shmuel, and telling you something else. Kihad Yom Ravach Barada, Yom Ravach Barada, Oim Rav Amnuna, Omarav Minayin Shefil Sichat Melcham Sarich Limud. When a Talmud Chacham speaks, listen, because even if it's not necessarily the Bar Torah, it's not something in which you're saying, okay, I'm about to say some deep, profound thought. They probably are still saying a deep, profound thought. Shenemar Valehu lo yiboil, that their leaves will not wither, which basically means, Rashi says, davar kal shabai, even something which is light and seemingly insignificant, that also has substance and merit. Okay, let's see if maybe we have a question over here. Question 3. So the question is, why did he say, don't bring the doors? So one answer is that you're right, you could use doors, but you don't need it because you have a shore. The second answer is no, don't bring doors because Daiter Shiltinik Gasalov Yitzirosha Chutzalasosamah. Question 4, let's do the next Mishnah. Someone who supports his sukkah with these legs of a bed. Share, that's okay, it's kosher. Says Rashi, now meet the shleimah, it's a complete bed. If the sukkah cannot stand by itself without these things, then it's possible. And the Gemara is going to explain right now what's Rabbi Yehuda saying. So my time Rabbi Yehuda. So Pligibu Rav Zera Rav Abba Bar Mamla. We have a machlokas to understand Rabbi Yehuda. According to one shot, is because the issue is that if you move it, the whole thing falls apart. Obviously, the sukkah is not a permanent structure. And Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that a sukkah there is keva b'ina, and it needs to be permanent. The other is that the issue is that it's being maimed, it's being held up by something which is makabel tumah. We know that the schach cannot be makabel tumah, but even the maimed, the thing that holds it up, should not be makabel tumah. So what's the nafkim? It can go in shenot shvudin shalbars v'sichlan. You have these very strong metal poles. Now, it's very strong and permanent, so therefore that would be acceptable. However, it's being held up by singlish davar kabbalah, and therefore according to him it would not be acceptable. However, by loshan el samach, the whole issue is dafka if you were supporting but if you put the schach on the bed, in other words, the bedposts are the walls only and not supporting the schach, then it's ksher. It's a permanent structure. If the schach is not being maimed on it, all it is, as Rashi says, avul kol doifne hasukkah. All it is the walls. Einon elamitos mishal stadim. They're on the three sides. So everyone will hold that that's okay. Even Rabbi Yehuda will not passel it because it's still keva, and it's not being maimed on davar makabel tumah. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's see question 4. So Tanakama says it's fine. However, Rabbi Yehuda says it's a problem because it needs to be deras keva. A sukkah needs to be permanent, and therefore the machlokas is using these karimita. If it's a deras arai, so it's okay. That's what the Tanakama holds. Rabbi Yehuda holds it must be more permanent if it's not acceptable. Or the machlokas is, are we makbid on being maimin haschach whatever makabel tumah? So according to Tanakama, it's not an issue. Rabbi Yehuda says it is. TA1. Mahatam shor Rabbi Yehuda. What is Rabbi Yehuda's reasoning that he says sheyoshen tachas mita b'sukkah yotza afilu isvirle the mita hu habi oil. So he says mishum desvirle sukkah diras keva oil arai umavatul oil keva. So he said even if you want to say it's like the second shot that really the bed is an oil. But nonetheless, the bed is only temporary. It's an oil. It's considered to be an oil arai, and therefore, something which is arai cannot come and be mavatal an oil keva, which is the sukkah. TB2. El devarim huskru sheshirun kamali egroif shel ben aftiach. What are the two things that were mentioned? He asked us to remember Rashi that the measurement is kamali egroif. So one shot is Ma'or Shaloi Nasvidi Adam Shirul Haitzi Asatoma Kamali Egrov. When it comes to something which is not made by man, or Ohel Shal Nasvidi Adam, an oil which is not made by man, Rabbi Yehuda's moeded to have oil Kamali Egrov. More Shaloi Nasvidi Adam Shirul Haitzi Asatoma Kamali Egrov. Ad kan.